John sighed, rubbing his eyes as he glanced at the clock on the wall. It was well past closing time at the museum, and the corridors above were silent, save for the occasional creak of the ancient buildings settling into the night. He had been working late more frequently, finding solace in the quiet basement where he could immerse himself in cataloging artifacts without interruption. Tonight, he was inventorying a collection of dusty crates that had been overlooked for years. He pulled out another crate, the wood splintering under his grip, and carefully pried it open. Inside, he found an assortment of old documents and relics, their historical significance waiting to be rediscovered. As he sorted through the items, his fingers brushed against something unusual, an ornate, metallic object partially buried under a pile of scrolls. Curious, John lifted the object into the dim light. It was a strange, intricately designed box, unlike anything he had seen before. Its surface was covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the flickering light. Intrigued, he set the box on the table and examined it more closely. As he ran his fingers along the box's edge, he felt a slight give. With a gentle push, the box clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, shimmering portal, swirling with an ethereal glow. John stared in disbelief, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always been fascinated by the mysteries of the past, but this was something beyond his wildest dreams. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before finally touching the portal's surface. A sudden rush of energy enveloped him, and the world around him blurred and shifted. When the sensation subsided, John found himself standing in the same basement, but everything looked different. The crates were gone, replaced by stacks of newly crafted artifacts. The air felt cooler, and the lighting was different, more natural. John realized he had traveled back in time. The museum basement was no longer a forgotten storage area, but a bustling workshop. He watched in awe as craftsmen and scholars moved about, oblivious to his presence. He took a deep breath, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, John decided to test the portal further. He closed his eyes and concentrated on returning to his own time. The same rush of energy swept over him, and he found himself back in the familiar, dusty basement, the portal still shimmering before him. John's mind raced with possibilities. He knew he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, but the implications were overwhelming. As he sat down to catch his breath, he resolved to keep this discovery a secret until he could understand it better. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed about history, responsibility, and the nature of time itself. In the days that followed, John found it nearly impossible to focus on his regular duties. His mind was consumed by the portal and the extraordinary power it held. Every night, after the museum closed, he returned to the basement, drawn by the portal's mysterious glow. One evening, curiosity got the better of him. He decided to take a more significant leap. Selecting a moment from history he knew well, he thought about a minor event, a small accident involving a famous inventor that had set back his work by several years. It seemed harmless enough to prevent, a way to test the portal's capabilities without major consequences. John activated the portal and stepped through, finding himself in the early 20th century. The details were exactly as he remembered from his studies, the cobbled streets, the attire of the people, the architecture. He tracked down the inventor, just in time to intervene and prevent the accident. Feeling a rush of triumph, he returned to the present, eager to see what had changed. Back in the museum basement, everything seemed the same at first glance. But as John ventured upstairs, he noticed subtle differences. The museum had a new wing dedicated to advanced technologies that shouldn't have existed for another decade. His colleagues spoke of innovations and breakthroughs as if they had always been a part of history. His initial excitement turned to dread as he realized the broader implications. The timeline had shifted, and while some changes seemed positive, the ripple effects were unpredictable. John's stomach churned with anxiety. He quickly retreated to his office, trying to piece together the alterations in history. It wasn't long before he understood the magnitude of his actions. Lives were different, paths had altered, and he couldn't possibly foresee all the consequences. John's sense of responsibility weighed heavily on him. He had altered history, and the changes were irreversible. With a sinking heart, he resolved to be more cautious. He needed to understand the rules of time travel, if there were any, and the potential dangers of his interference. The last thing he wanted was to cause harm when he only intended to observe. Determined to find a way to correct his mistake, John delved deeper into historical records, comparing the new timeline with his original knowledge. The more he read, the more complicated the web of changes seemed. He realized that even small actions could have far-reaching effects, making the idea of using the portal again both tantalizing and terrifying. As the weight of his actions pressed down on him, John knew he couldn't handle this alone. He needed someone he could trust, someone who could provide perspective and help him navigate the moral complexities of his discovery. That night, he made a decision. He would confide in Emily, his closest friend and colleague. She was the only person he trusted to understand the gravity of what he had uncovered and to help him figure out what to do next. John found Emily in the museum's library, engrossed in a stack of research papers. She looked up as he approached, raising an eyebrow at his anxious expression. "John, you look like you've seen a ghost," she remarked, her tone light but her eyes filled with concern. "Emily, I need to talk to you. It's about something unbelievable." John's voice was a mix of urgency and hesitation. Emily's curiosity was piqued. She set her papers aside and gestured for him to sit. "All right, tell me what's going on." John took a deep breath and recounted his discovery of the portal, his initial experiments, and the unintended consequences of his recent trip. Emily listened intently, her eyes widening with each revelation. When he finished, there was a long silence. Emily leaned back in her chair, processing what she had just heard. "John, it's incredible. And terrifying. You're sure it's real?" John nodded. "I've seen it with my own eyes. I've changed things, Emily. And I don't know how to undo it." Emily took a deep breath. "All right. First, we need to understand the portal better. There must be rules or limitations. We can't afford to make any more mistakes." Together, they formulated a plan. They would document everything about the portal and its effects, creating a detailed record of John's experiences. This way, they could track the changes and hopefully find a way to minimize or reverse the damage. Each night, after the museum closed, they worked in secret. Emily meticulously recorded John's descriptions and observations, while John continued to investigate the portal's properties. They experimented cautiously, making sure to observe without interfering. One evening, as they were comparing notes, Emily posed a question that had been bothering her. "John, have you considered why the portal was hidden in the first place? Someone must have known about its power and chose to conceal it." John nodded. "I've thought about that. Whoever hid it probably understood the dangers. We need to be extremely careful. If this falls into the wrong hands." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing through the basement. John and Emily exchanged worried glances. They quickly hid their notes and moved away from the portal. Dr. Harrison appeared, his face betraying a hint of suspicion. "Working late, are we? What exactly are you two up to?" John forced a smile. "Just cataloging some old artifacts. We've found some interesting items that need proper documentation." Dr. Harrison's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Well, keep up the good work. The museum's reputation depends on our diligence." With that, he turned and left, his footsteps fading into the distance. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was close. "We need to be even more careful." John agreed. "Yes, we can't let anyone else find out about the portal. It's too dangerous." As they resumed their work, the gravity of their situation settled in. They were not only custodians of history, but also guardians of a power that could reshape it. The responsibility was immense, and they vowed to handle it with the utmost caution. Dr. Harrison watched John and Emily from a distance, his suspicion growing with each passing day. He had noticed their frequent late-night sessions in the basement and their hushed conversations. His curiosity, combined with his ambition, drove him to investigate further. One evening, after ensuring that John and Emily had left the museum, Dr. Harrison made his way to the basement. He moved quietly, his eyes scanning the room for any clues. After a thorough search, he found nothing unusual until he noticed a slight disturbance in the dust on the floor, leading to the hidden compartment John had discovered. With a sense of triumph, he pried open the compartment and found the portal. Its shimmering glow fascinated him, and he couldn't resist touching it. The rush of energy enveloped him, and he found himself transported to a different time. Overwhelmed by the realization, Dr. Harrison knew this portal could be his ticket to fame and fortune. The next day, Dr. Harrison summoned John to his office. John entered, trying to mask his anxiety. "You wanted to see me, Dr. Harrison?" "Yes, John. I've noticed you and Emily working late quite often. What exactly have you been working on?" John's mind raced. "Just cataloging some of the older artifacts. There's a lot of work to be done, and we want to ensure everything is properly documented." Dr. Harrison leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on John. "I see. However, I think there's more to it than just cataloging. I happened to find something very interesting in the basement last night." John's heart sank. He knew Dr. Harrison had discovered the portal. "I can explain." Dr. Harrison raised a hand to stop him. "No need to explain, John. I've seen the portal myself. This discovery is monumental. Think of the possibilities. We could rewrite history, bring lost treasures to the present, and make unimaginable advances." John tried to remain calm. "Dr. Harrison, the portal is extremely dangerous. We've already seen how even minor changes can have far-reaching consequences. It's not something to be used lightly." Dr. Harrison's expression hardened. "Nonsense. This is an opportunity we can't afford to pass up. With careful planning, we can control it. We can be the ones to shape history." John realized that reasoning with Dr. Harrison was futile. "Please, Dr. Harrison, you don't understand. The risks are too great." Dr. Harrison stood, his demeanor authoritative. "You will show me how to use the portal properly. If you refuse, I will have no choice but to take matters into my own hands. Do you understand?" John nodded reluctantly, knowing he had little choice. He left Dr. Harrison's office, his mind racing with how to protect the portal from being exploited. He had to come up with a plan, and quickly. That evening, John and Emily met in the basement. John recounted his conversation with Dr. Harrison, his worry evident. "We need to find a way to secure the portal. Dr. Harrison's ambition could lead to disastrous consequences." Emily nodded, her face set with determination. "We'll figure something out. We have to." Together, they brainstormed ideas on how to safeguard the portal. They knew the stakes were higher than ever, and any misstep could lead to irreversible damage. Their dedication to protecting the portal strengthened their resolve, but they also knew that Dr. Harrison wouldn't give up easily. The battle for control of the portal had begun, and the future of history itself hung in the balance. John and Emily spent the next few days immersed in their work, not just cataloging artifacts, but also developing strategies to secure the portal. The weight of their responsibility was palpable. They knew they had to find a balance between understanding the portal and preventing its misuse. One evening, after hours of intense discussion, Emily voiced a concern that had been gnawing at her. "John, we need to decide on a clear set of rules for using the portal. We can't just react to every situation. We need guidelines." John nodded. "You're right. We need a code of ethics, something to guide us. But it's hard to determine what's acceptable. Every action has consequences, and we can't predict them all." They began drafting a set of rules, focusing on minimizing interference with historical events. They agreed that observing was permissible, but any action that could alter the course of history had to be thoroughly considered and justified by the potential benefits. As they worked, Emily posed another critical question. "John, what if there's a situation where changing history could save lives? How do we decide if it's worth the risk? John hesitated. That's the hardest part. I think we need to weigh the immediate benefits against the long-term impacts. If we can save lives without causing widespread disruption, it might be justified. But we have to be sure. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the basement door. Dr. Harrison entered, his expression unreadable. I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to see how your progress is coming along. John and Emily exchanged a glance. John forced a smile. We're making headway. It's a delicate process, as you can imagine. Dr. Harrison nodded, his eyes flickering to the hidden portal. I trust you're considering all possibilities. This discovery could change everything. John maintained his calm demeanor. We are, but we're also very aware of the potential risks. We want to make sure we handle this responsibly. Dr. Harrison's gaze hardened. Just remember, John, this is bigger than the two of you. The museum, and the world, stands to benefit immensely. Don't let caution paralyze you. After Dr. Harrison left, Emily exhaled slowly. He's not going to back down, is he? John shook his head. No, he's not. And that makes our work even more urgent. We have to protect the portal and ensure it's used ethically. As the days passed, John and Emily continued to refine their code of ethics. They debated various scenarios, each discussion bringing them closer to a set of guiding principles. They knew their decisions would have profound implications, not just for their own time, but for all of history. One night, as they finalized their guidelines, John shared a revelation. Emily, I've been thinking. The reason the portal was hidden might be because someone else faced the same dilemmas we're facing now. They chose to conceal it to prevent misuse. Emily considered this. That makes sense. It also means we're not the first to grapple with these questions. We need to learn from that. Their discussion solidified their resolve. They vowed to use the portal sparingly, focusing on observation and understanding rather than intervention. They also decided to document everything meticulously, creating a record for future guardians of the portal to follow. John and Emily's bond grew stronger through their shared mission. They knew they were stepping into a role of immense responsibility, one that required not just knowledge and skill, but also a deep sense of ethical duty. Together, they prepared for the challenges ahead, determined to protect the portal from those who would exploit its power. Agent Turner had been on edge for weeks. The reports of unusual activities at the museum had piqued his interest, and his instincts told him there was more to the story than anyone was letting on. As a government agent specializing in historical preservation and security, Turner had seen his share of strange occurrences, but something about this case felt different. One afternoon, he decided to visit the museum unannounced. He arrived under the guise of a routine inspection, but his true aim was to observe John and Emily. He found John in the middle of a tour, engaging visitors with tales of the museum's artifacts. Turner waited patiently, listening to John's detailed explanations, his mind analyzing every word for hidden meanings. When the tour ended, Turner approached John. Mr. Anderson, I'm Agent Turner. I've been assigned to review the museum's security protocols. Do you have a moment? John's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his composure. Of course, Agent Turner. What can I help you with? They walked through the museum, discussing various security measures. Turner's questions seemed routine at first, but gradually they became more probing. I've heard reports of unusual activities here recently. Late-night sessions, unexplained sounds. Can you shed any light on that? John chose his words carefully. We've been cataloging some old artifacts that were recently discovered. It's a time-consuming process, and sometimes we work late to ensure everything is properly documented. Turner nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. And these artifacts, they wouldn't happen to include anything unusual, would they? John forced a smile. Nothing out of the ordinary for a museum of this size and history. Just the usual mix of relics and documents. Turner's gaze lingered on John for a moment longer before he shifted his attention to the basement. I'd like to see the basement where you're doing this work. Can you show me? John's pulse quickened, but he nodded. Of course. Follow me. As they descended into the basement, John mentally prepared himself. He needed to keep Turner from discovering the portal at all costs. They walked through the cluttered space, John pointing out various artifacts and explaining their significance. He kept Turner away from the hidden compartment, steering the conversation to safer topics. Turner examined the basement carefully, his eyes scanning every corner. He seemed to sense something was amiss, but he couldn't put his finger on it. After a thorough inspection, he turned to John. Everything seems to be in order. But I'll be back for follow-up visits. Make sure you're keeping thorough records of your work. John nodded, relieved that Turner hadn't found anything. Absolutely, Agent Turner. We're very meticulous about our records. As Turner left, John breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly found Emily and filled her in on the encounter. We need to be even more careful. Turner is suspicious, and it's only a matter of time before he starts digging deeper. Emily frowned. We should double-check our security measures. Make sure there's no way anyone can find the portal unless we want them to. That night, they reviewed their precautions, reinforcing the hidden compartment and ensuring their documentation was secure. They also discussed contingency plans in case Turner's investigation led him too close to the truth. Despite the tension, John felt a sense of camaraderie with Emily. Their shared mission had created a strong bond, and he knew he could rely on her. Together, they would protect the portal and the secrets it held. As they wrapped up their preparations, John couldn't shake the feeling that their challenges were far from over. Turner's suspicion was just the beginning, and they had to stay vigilant. The future of history itself depended on their ability to safeguard the portal and use it responsibly. John's anxiety grew with each passing day. Dr. Harrison's relentless ambition and Agent Turner's persistent suspicion weighed heavily on his mind. Determined to minimize the impact of his earlier mistake, John decided to take another trip through the portal, this time with a more cautious approach. He chose a less significant moment in history, a minor event that he believed wouldn't have far-reaching consequences. After careful planning, he stepped through the portal, finding himself in the early 19th century. He observed the event, made a subtle change, and quickly returned to the present, hoping his actions would correct the timeline. Back in the museum basement, everything seemed normal. But as John ventured upstairs, he noticed a sense of unease among his colleagues. Conversations were hushed, and there was an air of tension that hadn't been there before. He approached Emily, who looked concerned. John, something's off. People are talking about strange anomalies. It's like history is unraveling. John's heart sank. What do you mean? Emily showed him several reports of historical inconsistencies. Items in the museum were disappearing or changing, and records no longer matched their physical counterparts. It was as if reality itself was fluctuating, struggling to reconcile the altered timelines. Panic set in. John realized his attempt to fix the past had only made things worse. The consequences of even minor changes were far more profound than he had anticipated. The timeline was destabilizing, and he didn't know how to stop it. As they pored over the reports, Dr. Harrison entered the room, his face grim. John, Emily, we have a problem. Our historical records are in disarray. What's going on? John hesitated, then decided to come clean. Dr. Harrison, we tried to correct a mistake I made during an earlier trip through the portal. But it seems our actions have caused more harm than good. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened. You've been using the portal without proper oversight? Do you realize what you've done? This could be catastrophic. John nodded, his guilt evident. I know. But we're trying to fix it. We just need more time. Dr. Harrison shook his head. Time is a luxury we don't have. We need to stabilize the timeline immediately. I'll handle this from now on. You're both relieved of your duties regarding the portal. John and Emily exchanged worried glances. They knew Dr. Harrison's approach would likely exacerbate the situation. They couldn't let him take control. But they also needed a plan to restore the timeline without causing further disruptions. That night, they met in the basement, away from prying eyes. "We need to find a way to stabilize the timeline," Emily said. "But how?" John thought for a moment. "We need to return to the source of the first change I made and restore the original events. It's the only way to reset the timeline and fix the anomalies." Emily nodded. "But we have to be careful. Any mistake could make things even worse." They prepared for the trip, gathering everything they needed to ensure they could restore the original events without further interference. As they activated the portal, John felt a mix of fear and determination. The fate of history rested on their shoulders. They stepped through the portal, arriving at the moment John had first altered. Carefully, they observed the scene, waiting for the right moment to act. When the time came, they ensured the event unfolded as it originally had, undoing John's previous interference. Returning to the present, they held their breath, hoping their actions had restored stability. As they emerged from the basement, they immediately noticed a change. The air felt different, and their colleagues seemed at ease. Conversations were normal, and the sense of tension had dissipated. Emily checked the records, confirming that everything was back to normal. "We did it, John. We fixed the timeline." John exhaled in relief. "But we need to be more vigilant than ever. The portal is too dangerous to be used without strict oversight." Dr. Harrison approached them, his expression unreadable. "I heard about your success. It seems you've managed to stabilize things. But this doesn't change the fact that the portal is a powerful tool. We need to secure it and ensure it's used responsibly." John and Emily agreed. They had learned a valuable lesson about the fragility of history and the immense responsibility that came with wielding such power. Together, they vowed to protect the portal and prevent it from falling into the wrong hands, knowing that their vigilance was the only thing standing between stability and chaos. The success of restoring the timeline brought a temporary sense of relief to John and Emily, but they both knew that their challenges were far from over. Dr. Harrison's ambition had not waned, and Agent Turner's suspicions had only intensified. The portal remained a powerful and dangerous tool, one that needed constant vigilance. One evening, as John and Emily were finalizing their security measures, Emily discovered something alarming. She found evidence that Dr. Harrison had been accessing the portal in secret. He had made several unauthorized trips, and each one had subtly altered the present in ways that were not immediately apparent. "John, look at this," Emily said, her voice tinged with urgency. She handed him a file containing records of Dr. Harrison's secret activities. John's face paled as he read through the documents. "This is worse than I thought. We need to confront him before he causes any more damage." Together, they devised a plan to confront Dr. Harrison and prevent him from further misuse of the portal. They decided to gather evidence and bring it to Agent Turner, hoping he would help them stop Harrison. The next day, they approached Dr. Harrison in his office. John held up the file, his voice steady but firm. "We know you've been using the portal, Dr. Harrison. This needs to stop. You're putting everything at risk." Dr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "You're out of your depth, John. This portal is the greatest discovery of our time. We can achieve so much with it." John shook his head. "You're not thinking about the consequences. Every change you make ripples through history. We've already seen how dangerous that can be." Emily stepped forward. "We have evidence of your unauthorized trips. We're taking this to Agent Turner." Dr. Harrison's expression hardened, and he took a step back, his hand reaching for a hidden drawer. Before John and Emily could react, he pulled out a small device and activated it. The room filled with a blinding light, and when it faded, Dr. Harrison had disappeared. John and Emily exchanged a look of shock and determination. "He's gone back in time again," John said. "We need to stop him." They quickly informed Agent Turner, who was initially skeptical but eventually convinced by the overwhelming evidence. He agreed to help them, understanding the gravity of the situation. With Agent Turner's assistance, they accessed the portal's logs and pinpointed Dr. Harrison's destination. It was a critical moment in history, one that could have severe consequences if altered. They prepared for the journey, knowing they had to stop Harrison at all costs. As they stepped through the portal, John felt the familiar rush of energy. They arrived in the past, the air around them crackling with the tension of the impending confrontation. They spotted Dr. Harrison, who was already meddling with the events. "Stop right there, Harrison!" John shouted, drawing the attention of bystanders. Dr. Harrison turned, his face twisted with determination. "You're too late, John. This change will secure our future." John advanced, his voice firm. "At what cost?" "You're risking everything for personal gain." A struggle ensued, the fate of history hanging in the balance. Agent Turner intervened, managing to subdue Dr. Harrison with a swift move. They restrained him and quickly worked to undo his interference, restoring the original timeline. Returning to the present, they ensured Dr. Harrison was taken into custody. Agent Turner, now fully aware of the portal's potential, promised to keep it secure. "You did the right thing, John. We'll make sure this power is protected." As the dust settled, John and Emily realized the enormity of what they had accomplished. They had faced betrayal and danger, but their dedication to preserving history had prevailed. They knew their journey wasn't over, but they were prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they vowed to continue their work, safeguarding the portal and using its power responsibly. The future of history depended on their vigilance, and they were ready to meet that responsibility head-on. Despite their efforts, the challenges of safeguarding the portal were far from over. Dr. Harrison's attempt to alter history had heightened awareness and interest in the portal, drawing more scrutiny and danger to its existence. John and Emily remained on high alert, knowing they couldn't afford to let their guard down. One evening, as they were reviewing the portal's logs, Emily stumbled upon something alarming. "John, look at this. It's another unauthorized access. Someone else has used the portal." John's heart sank. "Who could it be?" "Harrison is in custody, and we've been so careful." Emily's face grew pale. "What if it's someone from the government? Turner might have told someone higher up." Their fears were confirmed when Agent Turner called them in for an urgent meeting. "We have a situation," he said, his tone grave. "It appears that someone within the government has taken an interest in the portal. They've started using it without our knowledge." John and Emily exchanged worried glances. "What do we do?" Emily asked. Turner sighed. "We need to find out who it is and what they're doing. If they've made any significant changes, we have to fix it before it's too late." With Turner's help, they accessed more detailed logs, revealing the identity of the new time traveler, a high-ranking government official named Director Collins. Collins had been making trips to crucial moments in history, seemingly to gather information and potentially alter events for unknown purposes. John and Emily knew they had to act fast. They prepared for a new mission, one that would take them to various points in history to intercept and stop Collins. The stakes were higher than ever, and the future of the timeline depended on their success. Their first stop was the Renaissance, where Collins had been gathering knowledge from renowned artists and scientists. John and Emily tracked him to a bustling marketplace, where Collins was conversing with an influential figure. They waited for the right moment, then approached discreetly. "Director Collins, we need to talk," John said, his voice low but firm. Collins turned, his eyes widening in recognition. "You're the ones protecting the portal. You don't understand the potential here." Emily stepped forward. "We understand the risks. You're tampering with history, and that's too dangerous." Collins scoffed. "You're thinking too small. We can use this knowledge to solve our modern problems, to advance humanity." John shook his head. "At what cost? Every change you make ripples through time. You could destroy everything." A tense standoff ensued, but Collins eventually relented, realizing they were not going to back down. He agreed to return to the present with them, but John and Emily knew this was just the beginning. Collins was a powerful figure, and convincing him to stop would be an ongoing battle. Upon their return, they debriefed with Agent Turner. "We've managed to stop him for now, but this isn't over," John said. "Collins believes he's doing the right thing, and he won't give up easily." Turner nodded. "We need to secure the portal even more tightly. I'll ensure that only the three of us have access from now on. But we also need a plan to deal with Collins and anyone else who might try to exploit it." John and Emily agreed, their resolve strengthened by the encounter. They had seen firsthand how dangerous unchecked ambition could be. Their mission was clear: protect the portal, preserve history, and prevent anyone from using its power irresponsibly. As they fortified their defenses and prepared for future threats, John couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since he first discovered the portal. The responsibility was immense, but he knew he wasn't alone. With Emily and Turner by his side, he felt confident they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The encounter with Director Collins had been a wake-up call for John, Emily, and Agent Turner. They knew their efforts to protect the portal had to be redoubled. They increased security, implemented new protocols, and made sure that access was strictly limited to the three of them. Despite these measures, John couldn't shake the feeling that their challenges were far from over. His fears were confirmed when they discovered that Collins had gone rogue, determined to seize control of the portal by any means necessary. Collins had gathered a small group of like-minded individuals who believed in using the portal to shape history for their own purposes. One night, as John and Emily were working late in the basement, the power suddenly went out. The dim emergency lights flickered on, casting eerie shadows on the walls. John's heart raced as he heard footsteps echoing through the hallway. He glanced at Emily, who nodded, understanding the unspoken urgency. They quickly hid their notes and positioned themselves near the portal, ready to defend it. The footsteps grew louder, and soon, Collins and his group appeared, their faces set with determination. "Step away from the portal," Collins demanded, his voice echoing in the confined space. John stood his ground. "You don't understand the consequences of what you're trying to do, Collins. You're putting everything at risk." Collins sneered. "You're the one who doesn't understand. We have the power to create a better future. Why waste it on preserving the status quo?" Emily stepped forward. "Because history isn't ours to manipulate. The risks are too great. We've already seen what can happen." A tense silence filled the room as the two sides faced off. Suddenly, Agent Turner appeared, flanked by several security personnel. "This ends now, Collins. Step away from the portal." Collins's expression darkened. "You're too late, Turner. We're taking control of the portal, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." A fierce struggle ensued. John and Emily fought to protect the portal, using everything they had learned to outmaneuver Collins and his group. Turner and his team provided backup, but Collins's men were prepared and well-equipped. As the battle raged, the portal's energy began to fluctuate wildly, reacting to the chaos around it. John realized that if the fight continued, the portal could become unstable, potentially causing irreparable damage to the timeline. "Emily, we need to stabilize the portal," John shouted over the noise. Emily nodded and began working on the portal's control mechanisms, her fingers moving swiftly and precisely. John joined her, their combined efforts focused on restoring balance. Collins, seeing his chance slipping away, made a desperate move toward the portal. Turner intercepted him, and the two engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand struggle. Despite his best efforts, Collins managed to break free, charging toward the portal with a look of triumph. Just as Collins reached the portal, John and Emily activated a security override, creating a protective barrier that prevented anyone from accessing it. Collins slammed into the barrier, his momentum carrying him backward, and he fell to the ground, defeated. Turner and his team quickly restrained Collins and his group, ensuring they couldn't cause any more harm. The room fell silent, the immediate danger passed. John and Emily exchanged a relieved glance. They had managed to protect the portal, but they knew this was just the beginning of a long battle to keep it safe. Turner approached them, his expression serious but grateful. "You two did an incredible job. We couldn't have done this without you." John shook his head. "We're just getting started. Collins isn't the only one who will try to use the portal for their own ends. We need to stay vigilant." Emily nodded. "And we need to make sure the portal is secure, permanently." Together, they began the arduous task of reinforcing the portal's defenses, ensuring that it could only be accessed under the strictest conditions. They also documented the events of the night, creating a detailed record to guide future guardians of the portal. As dawn broke, John, Emily, and Turner stood together, looking at the now secure portal. They knew their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With renewed determination, they vowed to protect history and the future from those who would seek to alter it for their own gain. With Collins and his team securely detained, the immediate threat to the portal seemed to have passed. However, the battle had taken its toll on John and Emily. The realization that such a powerful tool could easily fall into the wrong hands weighed heavily on their minds. They knew they had to make a significant decision about the portal's future. As they worked to fortify the portal's defenses, John and Emily discussed the implications of its existence. "John, we need to think about the long term. As long as the portal exists, it will be a target. We might not always be here to protect it," Emily said, her voice filled with concern. John nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "You're right. We need to find a way to ensure it can never be used irresponsibly again." But how? That night, as they pondered their options, John had an idea. "What if we find a way to disable the portal permanently? It's the only way to guarantee it won't be misused." Emily looked at him, surprise and sadness in her eyes. "But that means giving up the ability to travel through time, to learn from history firsthand." John sighed. "I know, but the risks are too great. We've seen the damage it can cause. Protecting history is more important than our desire to explore it." They agreed to consult with Agent Turner, who, after some deliberation, also saw the necessity of such a drastic measure. "It's a tough decision, but I agree. The portal's potential for misuse is too high. Disabling it is the safest option." Together, they researched a way to deactivate the portal without causing further disruptions to the timeline. It took days of intense study and experimentation, but they eventually devised a plan. The process would require precise coordination and would be irreversible. On the night they decided to disable the portal, the atmosphere in the basement was somber. John, Emily, and Turner stood together, the weight of their decision palpable. John took a deep breath and addressed them. "We're doing the right thing. This is the only way to ensure history remains intact." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know. It's just hard to let go." Turner placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've both done incredible work. Protecting the future is the ultimate goal." They began the deactivation process, each step meticulously planned and executed. As they worked, memories of their journeys through time flashed through their minds, the awe of discovering new eras, the thrill of learning directly from the past, and the responsibility of ensuring those experiences didn't alter history. When the final step was completed, the portal's glow began to fade, its energy dissipating into the air. The once shimmering gateway to the past was now just a lifeless frame, a reminder of the incredible power it once held. John and Emily stepped back, their hearts heavy but resolute. They had sacrificed their dreams of exploring history to protect it, a decision that underscored their deep commitment to their mission. Turner nodded, his respect for them evident. "You've done something extraordinary. The world may never know the extent of your sacrifice, but history will remain intact because of it." In the following days, they ensured all records of the portal were securely stored and hidden, accessible only to those who would continue to safeguard its secrets. The museum resumed its usual operations, the basement now a place of memories rather than a gateway to other times. As they settled back into their routine, John and Emily found solace in knowing they had done the right thing. They continued their work with renewed dedication, their bond stronger than ever. They knew their journey wasn't over, their roles as guardians of history would continue, even without the portal. In the end, they had protected the future by letting go of the past, a decision that reflected their unwavering commitment to preserving the integrity of history for generations to come. Months passed, and the museum settled into a quiet rhythm. John and Emily continued their work, their dedication to preserving history as strong as ever. The basement, once the site of their greatest discoveries and most intense battles, now served as a solemn reminder of the responsibilities they had shouldered. One afternoon, as John was organizing a new exhibit on ancient civilizations, Emily approached him with a thoughtful expression. "John, I've been thinking. Even without the portal, there's still so much we can do. Our work here is just as important." John smiled, appreciating her optimism. "You're right, Emily. We've learned a lot from our experiences, and we can use that knowledge to educate others. History needs to be preserved and understood, even if we can't experience it firsthand." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Agent Turner. He greeted them warmly, a rare smile on his usually serious face. "John, Emily, I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done. Your actions have ensured the safety of history itself." John nodded. "It was the only choice. We couldn't risk the portal falling into the wrong hands again." Turner's expression grew more serious. "I understand, and I agree. However, there's something you both should see. I've discovered some new artifacts that might interest you." Intrigued, John and Emily followed Turner to a secure room where several ancient relics were laid out on a table. Among them was a small, intricately carved box, similar to the one that had initially housed the portal. Emily's eyes widened. "This looks familiar. Could it be related to the portal?" Turner nodded. "I believe so. I've been studying these artifacts, and they seem to indicate the existence of other portals or similar devices throughout history. We need to investigate further, but I thought you should be involved." John felt a surge of excitement mixed with caution. "If there are other portals, we need to ensure they're secured. We can't let history be altered." Turner agreed. "That's why I'm counting on you both. Your experience and dedication are invaluable. We'll work together to track down these artifacts and ensure they're protected." As they examined the box and the other relics, John and Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The portal might have been deactivated, but their mission was far from over. They had a new challenge ahead, one that required their unique skills and unwavering commitment to preserving history. Over the next few weeks, they delved into research, uncovering clues about the origins and locations of other potential portals. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the broader implications of their work. They realized that their journey wasn't just about protecting a single portal, it was about safeguarding the very fabric of history itself. Their bond grew stronger as they faced these new challenges together. They found solace in their shared mission and the knowledge that they were making a difference. The museum continued to be a place of learning and discovery, but now it also served as a hub for their ongoing quest to protect history. One evening, as they were reviewing their latest findings, Emily looked at John and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" John nodded, a sense of pride filling his heart. "We have. And we're not done yet. There's still so much to learn and protect." Emily's eyes sparkled with determination. "Then let's get to work. History won't protect itself." Together, they embarked on this new chapter of their journey, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew the road would be long and fraught with obstacles, but they were prepared. Their commitment to preserving history and preventing its misuse was unwavering, and they were determined to ensure that the past remained intact for future generations. As they worked late into the night, the museum stood as a silent testament to their dedication. The echoes of their footsteps mingled with the whispers of history, a reminder that while the past may be a fixed point in time, its preservation was a living, breathing effort, one they were honored to undertake. And so, Their story continued, a never-ending quest to protect the threads of time, ensuring that history remained a guiding light for all who came after.